Hey guys, Michael here. We thought we'd do something different and give you guys a little preview of our Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull episode, available now on our Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. In this section, we each talk about our feelings on Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and how those feelings may or may not have changed with the most recent rewatch, as the case may be. To listen to the full episode, click on the link in the show notes or head over to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon at patreon.com/beyondthescreenplay. Oh, and also a heads up, we tend to be a bit looser on the patron-exclusive episodes, so there is profanity in this clip. We'll be back this Friday, as usual, with our episode on Whiplash. Enjoy. Hello, patrons. Michael here with the whole team, Trisha Aran, Brian Bittner, and Alex Kairos. How are you guys doing today?
Hello.
Doing well.
Excellent. Welcome to our patron-exclusive episode on Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the 2008 film directed by Steven Spielberg, written by David Koepp. We are here at the end of our Indiana Jones journey, talking about this one, the fourth entry into the series. So we've talked a lot about the Indiana Jones films, and I feel like when talking about Indiana Jones films, there's this like specter, this elephant in the room, this elephant with a crystal skull that I think it's time for us to talk about and embrace. And so I just want to start
and embrace.
Embrace is a big word.
by recalling and retelling my experience and my relationship with this film. So
Okay.
much like I imagine all of us, 2008 came and there's a new Indiana Jones movie, and I was like, nobody asked for this, but I will go see it. And I remember sitting in the theater and from the opening shot being like, dear God, uh-oh.
Yeah.
With the gophers?
With the gophers.
Sorry, prairie dogs.
Whatever they
Whatever
are.
they are.
And we got that fun little sequence of cars and military caravan. And then there's the uh-oh kind of kept going and going. But then at some point I was like, I think I'm enjoying this film. And then there was a whole lot of uh-oh.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember particularly being like, you're not going to do aliens, right? Like, I know you kind of said Area 50, but like, you're not going to do aliens in an Indiana Jones movie, right? And then they did the aliens. And I was like, I can't believe that that's a thing that I just watched happen. But there was this little nugget of like, but it was kind of fun. Like, there's a little part of me that enjoyed that experience enough that I have seen this at least twice. And I want to say maybe even 3 times before revisiting it this time. And so going into this watching, after having watched all of them in a row, first of all, I still don't like the opening shot, but I understand that it's part of this visual, motif that they've been doing, which I didn't remember when it came out.
Right.
So there was a reason kind of for that.
Uh-huh.
The uh-ohs, I was anticipating a bit more, so I bumped less on them, right? It's aliens, so I can just be like, this is fine. This is a movie with aliens in it. And after watching all of the movies, aliens isn't actually that far out from like some of the crazier things that happen in this series. It's closer than I had imagined it when I first saw the movie anyway. And overall, I was like, really enjoying this ride. There are definitely still uh-ohs, and there is a very bad section of this movie that I think is essentially unredeemable. But overall, I enjoyed it this time. Enough to say, and not only do I enjoy it, I think it's actually like there are parts that are good, and overall, I think it is a finely made and told story. And I'm going to offer that
Surgical. Surgical how you put together that sentence.
Thank you. But I am going to offer, I don't think it's the worst Indiana Jones movie.
Wow.
So
There are people who would agree with that.
that's kind of where I am at this point of like, you know what? I kind of enjoyed it. It's kind of like occasionally when I could watch the prequels and be like, turn off my brain and just go on the ride. And this was a fun ride. So that's me and the Crystal Skull. What about you guys and the Crystal Skull? Brian, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Yeah, very similar experience. I remember like reading an article back in 2005 or 6 or whatever that Spielberg was like, we're not doing very little CG on this. It's all going to be practical and
all the stunts will be real. Yeah.
Right. And 450 CG shots later, like I remember sitting in the theater and like the prairie dog, which, they exist.
You could
Like
get 'em.
you can get a fucking prairie dog.
We don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And then, I get like, okay, you're doing a fun twist on the mountain theme, the Paramount logo, but like fucking porgs, we don't need to then see them like reacting to the action later on, right? Like I'm like, brr. So yeah, I think that hurt my initial experience, and then the entire, what is it, end of the second act finale, just like.
Amazon chase.
Right. That's just like all I remember, again,
Yeah.
I talked about the peak end rule, right? Like your impression is made by the highest highs, the lowest lows, and how you feel at the end. And for me, the lowest lows, like, I don't even remember what the highest highs were for me. It was just the lows were so low.
Yeah.
But I do think, like, I was really looking forward to watching it again because this is something we can get into. But I think something I've been thinking about during these movies is the difference between good and fun. And I think like the prequel, the Star Wars prequels and this movie are still fun. Like they're just enjoyable to sit and watch, where like watching The Hobbit extended is like, well, I'm not even having fun. Like,
Right.
At that point, and then there are movies that are good that are not fun because they're not supposed to be, obviously, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or American History X or something, right? Like movies that are that by no point in their design. And then there's movies that are good and fun, like Raiders and Last Crusade and, Spider-Verse and whatever, like movies that are just, they do everything. But like, I agree with you, Michael. This is a fun movie. Like I enjoyed watching it, and watching it again with my expectation brain turned off. I was like, 15 minutes to 60 minutes in is like a pretty good Indiana Jones movie. Like when there's not all sorts of crazy bullshit happening, then I'm just like, I like this. They're like going on an adventure and they're exploring things. And they're doing, there's skeleton ninjas and like, okay, but like and then there's like shit. Like the only thing I think in like that, the chunk of the movie that I think is a good Indiana Jones movie that I think is like so bonkers stupid is when they slide on the motorcycle through the library and then everyone freaks out and runs and comes to a stop. And then like a student asks Dr. Jones a question.
You don't like that?
It's so fucking dumb.
That bothers you more than anything else?
That feels like...
That bothers me more than anything else in that 45-minute chunk of this movie that feels like it's sort of safe. But no, everything, like there's so much like that. To me, that's the same kind of humor as the fencing with Marion, like telling him how to fence correctly. Like, remember your training while you're fencing on the top of two cars. It's like that same sort of meta humor where the movie knows there's no danger. So it's just making jokes instead of like trying to be a movie anymore. There's a lot of stuff. But anyway.
Actually, really quickly, that moment with the student asking him a question, to me, doesn't seem that out of step with a lot of other Indiana Jones movies. It really reminds me of the moment in Last Crusade where Indy and Henry spin around in the fireplace and they're like in the Nazi war room and they're like exchange smiles with this pleasant Nazi lady right before she shouts alarm at them. Like it's kind of in that vein, I think.
But I think that's, for me personally, that's also where even Last Crusade starts to get a little like, you're really pushing.
But Temple of Doom is your indie movie,
because
these are the problems.
Yeah, I'm not arguing Temple of Doom is good. I'm saying I grew up with it, and that's it. Like, I'm not going to argue Temple of Doom is better than anything, basically.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's totally fair. Yeah, Trisha.
And that chase through Marshall College, which we could like get to more if we want to, but I remember distinctly walking out at the end of the movie and going like, that chase was kind of good. Like with the motorcycle and the cars, and I watched it really carefully this time. And it's Harrison Ford diving in and out of car windows, and grabbing a hold of the motorcycle, and it looks good. It's all stunt work. Like, it's cool. It's a cool idea to bring Indiana Jones's adventures back to his home turf. And there are some stupid moments in it where like the Marcus Brody statue and
right.
But overall, that's a really cool sequence. Anyway, I just remember that I agree that when you walk out of this movie, start thinking back on it right when you get to the end, you do get really stuck in monkey territory, and it's hard to remember anything else. But that was what I immediately gravitated towards, because it was in the middle of that chase through Marshall College that I was like, this is an Indiana Jones movie, and I am having fun for sure. And then the rest of it is pretty middling, but it's no worse than Temple of Doom, except for some of those moments that are quite bad. Right. And I have a lot of thoughts on those moments, which I hope we get to, and like what makes them worse. Because I feel like in the Star Wars prequels, we talked a lot about like where the line is. Like we said, it's hard to really clearly define the line sometimes in what feels like in world versus what feels out of world. Right. And I think with Star Wars, it's really extra slippery. But I think with Indiana Jones, I think we can draw I have a couple ideas about lines. But anyway, but yeah, that was very similar to my experience of like, this movie's not great and it's really bad at points. But at the end of the day, do you want a fourth helping of one of your favorite meals? Mm-hmm. Even if the casserole is cold by now. And like, the answer is yes. Like, and do I want a fifth helping of this same casserole? I think I do, is the thing.
But it's really cold now.
It's very, very cold.
Yeah, but James Mangold still can make good movies.
Maybe it's going to reheat beautifully, you guys. Yeah. We don't know. It's been in the fridge
leftovers
for a long
are good.
time. It's been in the lead-lined refrigerator for a long time. So maybe it'll be okay.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. And Alex, what was your impression this time around?
Yeah, I mean, like Brian said, that thing where you have your impression of a movie is maybe its lowest moments or highest highs or whatever. And I remember when I saw this movie, it was right out of film school. I was my most kind of like intense, cynical film student self. And I was just so devastated by how stupid it all was. And just, the dumb CG, everything. And I just hated everything in the Amazon sequence from top to bottom. I just absolutely despised.
Yeah.
And so I walked out of this movie just feeling like, wow, that was complete, useless, wasted opportunity, should never have been made, garbage. Watching it again, like Michael said, after watching all three of the original trilogy back to back, there is that kind of magical window of this movie before the universally thought of as bad section that I really enjoyed this time. And I really was down to go with the George Lucas idea of we're going to make basically a 50s B movie in the way that the original trilogy was a throwback to these serial adventure shows, So I think there was something there that is a different direction and a bold choice, but I was kind of down with this time. And like that motorcycle chase was a moment where I was kind of taken aback. Like, wait a minute, I forgot about this scene. This is actually a really good action scene. And it's not full of bullshit CGI nonsense. It's actually what I want from an Indiana Jones movie. So it was a much more enjoyable experience this time. I was ready for aliens. I wasn't prepared actually for like the good parts. So they were like a nice surprise. And then I just had the same downward slide, all the way through the end. Yeah. So yeah, very interesting. And you're right, Trisha. I think like there's enough in this movie that in comparison with what I just watched in the original trilogy is like, oh no, this is actually on par with a lot of stuff from the previous Indiana Jones installments. Like there is really goofy stuff in these previous movies. Yeah. And there's laws of physics that don't make any sense. And there are weird, magical, crazy things that are just jumping the shark in the original trilogy also in a lot of cases. So, but they don't nuke the fridge. They don't monkey the Shia LaBeouf. We don't have those kind of moments in the original trilogy. So I think there is a line crossed here, and I would like to talk about those lines.
Well, since it is early on, should we just dive into a nuke the fridge conversation?
Sure.
Let's nuke the fridge, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed that preview. To listen to the full episode, head to the link in the show notes or head over to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon at patreon.com/beyondthescreenplay. And we'll see you on Friday with our episode on Whiplash.